The good name of Mitch McConnell in Kentucky will live on forever. Trump has no right to disparage me and to mock my visage. Trump made his bed, and he has to sleep in it. He has no right to talk about me behind my back. I would never do that to him. I would only do worse.
Trump slams stone cold loser McConnell. This is the Washington Times, another fantastic publication. The Washington Times, Washington Examiner's awesome. This is the Washington Times. Former President Donald Trump slams Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and former Vice President on Saturday for giving up too easily. Mr. Trump referred to Mr. McConnell as a stone-cold loser. Stone-cold loser at one point, according to an account in the Washington Post. It's interesting, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, others, they look at this, they're like, did you see what Trump said about his own Republicans? Oh my goodness, what's happening to the Republican Party? Mitt Romney, Mittens, save them! We want viable competition. If Mitt Romney were the nominee, they would make him into a greater tyrant and despot and authoritarian than they did with Trump. Mitt Romney could be the first president to do something, could preside over achievements like being the first president to step foot in North Korea like Trump, or the Abraham Accords like Trump, or remove Americans from never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts on May 1st, 2021, which is what Trump negotiated. Mittens Romney could preside over record low unemployment. They would say the sky was falling. You better believe there would be articles published. You know, Trump was bad, but we never imagined any other Republican could be worse. Mitt Romney is worse. You see this, like, hilarious kind of like, you know, we might not agree, but at least we dislike Trump, right? Never Trump Republicans. Give me your hand. You know, at least we can agree on decency and goodness and normality. They would never accept, so, like, they're watching, the media is watching this in disbelief because deep down inside they realize that Trump runs the Republican Party. There's nobody, even Mitt Romney, like weeks back, said if he decides to run again, he'll be GOP nominee and there'll be no competition. He still has around a 90% approval rating within the Republican Party. Republicans investigated an incoming Republican president alongside Democrats. So Democrats and the Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld wing of the Republican Party investigated Trump based on nonsense. You have to be a gigantic imbecile to believe that Trump worked with Russia to buy Facebook ads. That's not national security. Like, they purchased a dossier allegedly with help from one Russian intelligence official. So it's like they literally used a dossier that was compiled. Clinton purchased a dossier and the DNC that was compiled with help from Russian officials, and allegedly the whole thing was nonsense. It was made up. There was nothing that was truthful in there. It was never used to indict anybody. So why would you refer to something as an intelligence report? But hit subscribe to this channel right now because I'm going to give you the bird's eye view, the aggregate view of everything. If you want to read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, The Jerusalem Post, go to hagoodman.com. The Federalist, The Daily Caller, go to hagoodman.com. You can see my debates as well. If you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below in the description, the pinned comment, and also on hagoodman.com. But President Trump is consolidating power, and he did good things. He experienced... so basically he just went after, McConnell.
My good name will live on. You will not demean or disparage the good name of the McConnell family in Kentucky.
He just went after people he didn't like. And Democrats do this, but in a different way. So when Hillary Clinton will say, yeah, you know what, they're grooming Tulsi Gabbard. The Russians are. And nobody, there won't be any outrage. There's a baseless claim. It's absurd. There's no evidence. The whole thing was a myth perpetuated and purchased by the Democratic Party. They outsourced a third-party tech firm. We could go on forever. They just purchased their myth. Their myth. There was no evidence after like years of Mueller investigating because it never happened. But they don't like what Tulsi Gabbard stood for, so Hillary Clinton says, "Oh, yeah, she's a Russian operative. Yeah, they're grooming her." Then they weasel out of the accusation by saying, "Well, we didn't mention her name. We didn't actually say Tulsi Gabbard was a Russian operative. What we said was that we know who they're grooming. We know who they're grooming." And so it's this very, very deceitful and like very, just really conniving way of dealing with political adversaries. So whereas Trump says, yeah, the guy's a loser, I can't stand him, he gives up, and all this stuff, which, by the way, there should have been a dialogue, discourse, debate, discussion. But there wasn't. And so the last couple of months of last year were handled in a horrendous manner. You can't really blame McConnell for that because, well, we'll get to that in a second. Democrats, they cheat Bernie Sanders. They're forced. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is forced to resign in disgrace. They go after Tulsi Gabbard. They force people to fall in line. Trump doesn't do that. Trump just says, look, he has no like, and this is where there's there's the negative here. Okay, so he has no political influence over McConnell. Unfortunately, very little. His political influence is relegated to just insulting McConnell.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but bad words from the Orange Menace will never hurt me.
That's unfortunately. Anyway. He needs to build coalitions to give people. President Trump, the next 4 years, he's engaging in a sledgehammer, bulldozer approach to rebuilding the Republican Party, which could very well work. But I don't know if it's going to give him the lasting coalition, or I don't like that word, but Democrats have a coalition. It's called honest graft. Anyone who falls in line gets favorable media coverage. Anyone who doesn't get favorable media coverage. Oh, how can you prove that? Yeah, there's no oath signed by Jimmy Kimmel and the editors of the Washington Post and intelligence operatives and all of Hollywood on Twitter and social media, but you get hooked up. President Trump needs to find a way to make it politically, to motivate other Republicans from a political perspective to join his viewpoint, his view of the Republican Party. They call it Trumpism, but there's nothing. The word Trumpism, it was created by Democrats to just continue their fabricated and conjured up notion of this orange nightmare. Okay. President Trump didn't demonize people. We see what's taking place. See, Democrats don't demonize anyone. Oh my goodness, they don't say anything wrong, although they do. Although they do say offensive things all the time, and they have in the past, worse than anything Trump that said that was offensive. But you have Democrats now. What was I gonna say? I lost track of my. You need to get. Oh, you see what's taking place in the border now. I mean, it's an absolute catastrophe. The same facilities that the same cages are being used, the same facilities, no outrage. You're talking about hypocrites. A great many Democratic voters are pure hypocrites who aren't really into politics, but they read the New York Times and they think they're really up to date. They don't realize the New York Times is an extension of the Democratic Party. The Washington Post and New York Times are not the Washington Post and New York Times of 30 years ago or even 10 years ago. They're extensions of the Democratic Party. They will immediately pick one side. And they did this with the Bush administration too. Media and intelligence operatives slither towards the political party in power at the moment. Unfortunately, Republicans lost an opportunity because of people like Paul Ryan and Richard Burr, and in many ways like Mitch McConnell. They lost an opportunity to really consolidate power around a person who perhaps wasn't part of the establishment, but look, they got 3 Supreme Court picks, and Democrats have only themselves to blame. They cheated Bernie Sanders, and people didn't fall in line. They had 4 years, but they investigated Trump. They stood silent when he was getting impeached over nonsense. I mean, you have Mitt Romney, who voted to convict President Trump the second time around. And Trump made a mistake. He made a couple of mistakes. The last couple months of last year, he made mistakes, okay? But he should have realized that they weren't going to go to bat for him. You cannot intimidate or force a person like Mitch McConnell or Mitt Romney or even people on the fence. Like, you can't force political creatures to show loyalty. Even Pence, you can't force people like who are lifelong politicians to just be loyal. You think Democrats are loyal to each other because they love each other, because of ideology? They don't care. They lie all the time. Like, oh yeah, Medicare for all, and it never happens. They lie all the time about most of their policies. They're still building the wall. They're still building the wall, and it's a catastrophe what's taking place, and the cages are still being used and all of that stuff. They're hypocrites. Then you get Keith Olbermann. What do you want us to do? I don't know. How about what you promised to do? Maybe that would be okay. Maybe that would be good for once in your lives. But he needs to he needs to create political incentive. These are lifelong politicians. Now, he doesn't have the media. He doesn't have, publishing companies like, Josh Hawley, his book deal no longer exists, but Pence gets like a $4 million book deal. Oh, he's a good person. Pence was important to 2 narratives. One, in setting up and framing Michael Flynn. Pence should have spoken out 4 years ago and said, no, Michael Flynn, he didn't have to tell me anything. Or whatever, like, Flynn did nothing wrong. One of the biggest mistakes of President Trump made was abandoning Michael Flynn in the beginning of his presidency. That's the biggest mistake, because when you give corrupt people like a hand, they'll take the arm. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. He should have fought and said, no way. He didn't do anything. Where's the evidence this man did anything wrong? Oh, we're going to get him in the Logan Act. Then you know what? He should have said, I'll call your bluff. Go ahead. And then we'll get John Kerry and others on the same legislation that's never prosecuted. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. President Trump has to build, if you want to call it, coalitions, and he can take over the Republican Party simply by, saying this guy's a loser, but it won't work. I don't think it'll work long term. He needs to build these coalitions because it didn't work last time. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's broke, fix it. Give me your thoughts below. I will be doing a segment probably today on why I believe George Floyd was murdered. And it's an important segment. And so I will be getting that up today. All right.